Welcome to today's webinar, Closing the Trust Gap in Data and Analytics. I'm Stephanie McReynolds, Vice President of Marketing here at Alation, and I have with me today Erin Kalb. And it looks like we have quite a few people who are still joining, so we'll do what I call a soft start to today's webinar and give you guys a little eye candy, a nice cartoon to read through, which is topical, I think, or at least it was funny to me. I unfortunately won't be able to hear anyone laughing on the other side of the line or making fun of me for my dad jokes, but I thought this cartoon would be a good way for us to start off our morning together.
Stephanie, I think it's hilarious.
At least Erin and I are cracking up, if nothing else. I got a little worried. Yvette, who helps us to organize webinars, told me that there are attendees on the line from over 50 countries and 50 different industries. And I don't know if this humor translates well into other cultures and languages, but I'm hoping it's historic or prehistoric enough.
I've heard
that it
rumors
might translate.
that in Denmark, they still aren't over the dinosaur extinction.
Excellent. Excellent. Good. So I want to make sure that we have full time for the content, so I won't pause on the cartoon for too long, but it did help us get some additional folks on the line who are struggling with the technology maybe to get into the webinar. So we'll go ahead and start our content for today with just a few housekeeping items. Our agenda today is 60 minutes, but we will be reserving a significant amount of time at the end of today's webinar for questions and answers. We'd love to make this session interactive, so as you have a question, please enter the question into the window on the right-hand side of your interface. So if you pop open that bar that you use to get into the GoToWebinar, you'll see there's a tab called Questions. If you do have a question at any point during the webinar, please just enter it there, and we will queue them up either to answer during the webinar or at the end of today's prepared presentation. We'd also love, if there's something, we'd love for you to share your thoughts and observations with the outside world, maybe people who couldn't attend. So if you have an interesting observation during today's webinar, please feel free to tweet it. Alation is our official handle, and data catalog is our hashtag. Feel free also to use @Slangenfeld, which is my handle, or @Erin S. Kalb, which is Erin's. If you're interested in deeper product knowledge than we'll be going over today, we will have a demo as part of today's presentation, but it'll be fairly high level. And if you'd like to learn more and to dig into the details, please go to alation.com/learn more for more information. And then the last question we often get asked is, will there be a replay of the presentation in case I have to drop off or in case I have colleagues who weren't able to join us? And we will absolutely share the replay within 24 to 48 hours of today's presentation. So hang with us. Sometimes it takes a little while to get it produced, but you'll certainly get a copy of the replay in your inbox in the next day or so. So hopefully the technology is working out for everyone. If it's not, again, please just reach out to us through the chat window if you have any problems with audio or video today, and we'll try to get you back in line as quickly as possible. So as I mentioned, today we have two speakers, myself and Erin Kalb. Erin is a co-founder here at Alation, so he's been here from the very start. And his role at Alation today is the Vice President of Design as well as Strategic Initiatives. So his background is mostly in product and engineering and design, and it's always a pleasure to present with Erin, so I'm excited that we are taking this opportunity to co-present.
Thanks for having me, Stephanie.
No problem, no problem. Our contact information is below if you want to reach out to us either on Twitter, that's the first handle here, or on email. So what will we discuss? What specifically will we discuss today? The topic today is around the trust gap that we see in data and analytics. So we're going to talk about why that trust gap exists, how you can use best practices for information stewardship to close that trust gap, And then we believe that we have some tooling to help, and third parties like Gartner and Forrester have validated that. So we'll also show you a live demo of a day in the life of an information steward and some examples of how technology can help close that trust gap. But of course, it's not just all about technology. It's also about people and process and managing your organization to close that trust gap. So that's where we'll start today. And then about half the time we'll spend together will be a live demo. So I'll cover the first two topics, and then I'll be handing off to Erin to walk you through the product. So at least everyone in the United States, I don't know if everyone from all 50 countries, but this probably made global news. So most people probably remember the two images on the right-hand side of this slide. And it was pretty hard to ignore the debate on facts that broke out over this comparison of two images from the most recent presidential inauguration. For me, what this debate really brought to light was how the context of data can dramatically alter an insight, or in this case, what was claimed to be a fact. And really the context of data in this case is simple. It's the context of how the data was gathered. So if you remember the debate over these inauguration images, it was a comparison of how many attendees attended Obama's inauguration versus how many attendees attended President Trump's inauguration. And some journalists argued that you should look at these two images and count the number of individuals as the factual answer to that question. So that's one way to collect data. If you remember the debate, Sean Spicer argued that there were other ways to calculate attendance that were more accurate than a photo comparison. He argued that you should look at how many Metro riders were tracked on the Washington, D.C. Metro that day. Another alternative that was put out there was to calculate how many people could make it through the magnometers on the mall. The argument that the tracking that the magnometers did for security reasons would be a more accurate calculation or collection of data than what a photo would depict, because it was only taken during a particular moment, a particular time of the day. These are all equally valid ways to collect data, and yet if you looked at those different numbers, you would get surprisingly different conclusions to whether more individuals attended the Obama inauguration versus the Trump inauguration. And so this nuance when it comes to data analysis, this nuance of how data was collected, how it is processed, what methodologies are used, is really important to understand when you are presenting insights, particularly to a broad audience like the US public. And we would put forward that that this challenge of the nuance of data is one of the reasons why there's a trust gap in analytics in our organizations today. So what is this trust gap? This quote from Brian Hopkins, based on some research he's done at Forrester, I think encapsulates what the challenge is. It's that pretty much almost every organization in the world today wants to be data-driven. In his calculations, 74% of firms or enterprises want to be data-driven. But only a small portion of those, 29%, are actually connecting analytics to management action. So despite all of the investments in big data, despite all of the architectures that have been stood up, whether that's a data lake or Hadoop or a database or self-service analytics and data viz tools, despite all of that investment, when it comes to actually making decisions based on data, it's a very small portion of the population of enterprises that are able to connect analytics to action. And we've labeled this as the trust gap. And why is that trust gap important? It's because information only becomes a true insight when the enterprise understands exactly what to do with it. If you have an observation but you can't apply it, it's not truly an insight, it's just an observation. It's only when you begin to internalize these insights and change behaviors, change how your organization is operating, that you truly get the benefit from analytics. So data collection is one nuance that needs to be understood well before you can manage an organization to an insight. But there are a couple other factors in analytics which contribute. And I'm going to take everyone back a little bit in history to 2008 and the worldwide financial crisis, and give you an example of how even good actors who had positive intent to change the world, created a trust gap with data. And so hang with me just for a few minutes, and I think you'll see how this might be applied to your own organization or enterprise. So go back to 2008 and the worldwide financial crisis. Greece in particular, out of all the countries of the world, is in a world of hurt. In 2008, they admit to overstating key financial indicators, and they asked the EU for financial assistance. This was done amidst protests and riots in the streets. And while all of this chaos is happening, there are two Harvard economists that publish a paper. The paper is called Growth in a Time of Debt. And both the IMF and the European Central Bank use this paper as a justification to define a response and austerity measures for Greece. As a result of those austerity measures, suicides increase in the Greek population, particularly amongst women who are managing households. Malaria returns to the country for the first time in 40 years because a lot of individuals lose their jobs and lose their health care as a result of the austerity measures. So this isn't a theoretical example of how decisions based on data can go awry. It's an example that has significant impact on individual lives in the population of Greece. So what is interesting about this paper, Growth in a Time of Debt, and why have I chosen this to define what a stylized fact is? So this paper was an economic paper. It was well documented. Reinhardt and Rogoff, who are the two Harvard economists, are well known in their disciplines, and they argue in the paper that historically there was a tipping point for public debt that had a significant negative effect on economic growth. They claim that this finding was supported by very simple mathematical calculations. We're not talking about Monte Carlo simulation. We're not talking about data science. This is basic math that pretty much everyone can understand. And they took 20 advanced economies in the post-war period, ran them through these simple calculations, and argued that the Greek austerity measures were necessary to turn around the economy there. Now, they did one thing that was super helpful after the fact. In addition to publishing their findings in this paper in detail, they also published access to the data sheet and the spreadsheets that drove their simple math analysis. What that publication did for the rest of the economic community was allow a different group of academics, Hernan, Ash, and Pollan, to rerun the numbers that Reinhardt and Rogoff had made their assumptions off of. And in 2013, when they reran those numbers, a different outcome emerged. And this is where we get to start to understand how easy it is to create stylized facts. Because the new story from Herndon, Ash, and Pollan, highlighted here in orange, is that the conclusion of the first paper was incorrect. That actually austerity measures might not have been necessary to impose on the Greek economy to return to normalcy. What they found is that there was no significant difference in GDP growth until the debt to GDP ratio was above 120%, whereas Reinhardt and Rogoff had argued that at anywhere above 90% there was an issue. How did that disconnect between these two papers, that gap, get created? When the second group of economists dug into the details, they found that there were some selective exclusion of data points. What looked like outliers actually shouldn't have been excluded in the first paper. They should have been included in the analysis. And there was also some unconventional weighting of the summary statistics. So the methods that were used to analyze the exact same data points were slightly off. Now, these could have been either mistakes that were made, or they could have been just seemingly small choices in how to handle the data, but they delivered dramatically different results. The most impactful change that the second group of economists made were to include 3 countries that were excluded from the original data set when it was run through the analysis. These countries were Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. And it was actually the exclusion of New Zealand that almost 100% contributed to swaying the results. So one small change in decision and methodology significantly impacted the conclusion, which significantly impacted a large population increase. I call this a stylized fact because none of these economists were intending to do harm, but by making some changes in their methodologies or not having full awareness of how the assumptions they were making would impact the outcomes, they created a fact that was maybe not 100% truthful, that was stylized to meet their arguments. And whether you call it fake news, alternative facts, or stylized analysis, these types of decisions exist in every organization and enterprise. It doesn't mean that there are bad actors or people have malintent. It's just small decisions that are made in the analytics process that can really sway the outcomes one way or another. And so the question as analytics practitioners for all of this is, how can you avoid these stylized facts? There's really no right or wrong. There's only perspective in analytics. And different perspectives on what we're trying to achieve with our analysis and the application of different methods can result in different insights or facts. There's history to science and how science overcame this issue of stylized facts. And it goes back to the publication of data and the scientific method. It wasn't actually until the 1940s that the scientific method and best practices around the scientific method included publishing your base data to the rest of the scientific community. It was a gentleman by the name of Robert K. Merton, whose image is on this slide, who introduced that concept and socialized it in the scientific community. He argued that by sharing the inputs to a scientific finding, you could actually increase the innovation and allow individuals to build upon the assumptions of others more rapidly in the scientific community. And the other advantage of publishing data sets broadly was that these different perspectives on how the results were analyzed could be brought to light. So we'd argue that we need to take the same approach and the same methodology in our organizations around analytics, that everyone should understand the context of how data was collected, and we should share that across the community of not only analysts, but individuals interpreting that analysis and turning it into decisions. That data, as well as the methodologies to get to an insight, should be easily reproducible, that the logic should be transparent, and that if we undertake this small amount of additional work when preparing our analysis, that we can actually get more trust in insights within the decision-making community. And what has changed in the world from years past is that data catalogs and technology that help document analysis as you're performing it can actually help automatically capture a lot of this information. So we'll show you in a demonstration in a little bit how data catalogs help. But I'd like every practitioner on the phone to think about what are some of the best practices that you can start to implement in your enterprise to help remove stylized facts from the conversation and close the trust gap. And there's 3 basic categories of best practices. I've based these best practices on about 100 Alation customers and how they've rolled out their analytics and data cataloging initiatives and information stewardship initiatives to their user bases. I'm sure there's many more ideas out there, but from the knowledge we have at Alation, I wanted to share these 3 best practices. The first being consistency, the ability to start to get consistent use of data, of analytics, and interpretation of insights. And one of the customers who I think has really pushed the ball forward in their organization around consistency is Meijer. Meijer is a grocery store in the Midwest, and the lead of the data analytics initiative for Meijer introduced what he called a social contract for self-service analytics. So rather than implementing Tableau or MicroStrategy or Click and allowing for end users to just go wild with self-service analytics, he actually asked the end users of those tools to sign a social contract, which determined some simple boundaries to self-service analytics. Talked about things like colors, fonts, displays, then more challenging issues like methodologies that you should use for self-service analytics, with the argument that if everyone of all the end users of these tools abided by that social contract, it would be easier for the data stewarding organization to then promote from grassroots development data assets that were ready for gold standard usage. And so this simple concept that actually he was inspired by his high school freshman who had to sign a social contract to enter his high school program. That simple inspiration led Meijer to have a more consistent way of stewarding the output of self-service analytics in their organization. So getting consistency in usage and definition of boundaries is an important best practice. Transparency is also an important best practice. So this means the ability to make all of the work available to be able to reproduce any analytic and insight. It means citing sources, documenting assumptions, offering some training for individuals who have never had an analytic training session on methodologies for getting to accurate insights. And the third best practice I'll share is around collaboration. What we found helps in establishing and solidifying consistency and transparency is actually to approach stewardship from a perspective of collaboration, where there might be official stewards in your organization, but also the opportunity to tap into the knowledge of individual analysts and data scientists and business users as curators of the data, of the analytic methods that are being used. By encouraging everyone in the organization to share their thoughts and opinions, to upvote or downvote data sets, to annotate analysis, you're facilitating a community, almost like a scientific community of interest that will help manage accuracy and tie insights to real decision-making in your organization and build a foundation of confidence in analytics. So in a few minutes, we're going to look at how these best practices translate into product and how data catalogs can help automate and speed up your effort to achieve these 3 best practices. But I'll give you a little bit of preview here. When I talk about consistency, one of the things that data catalogs can help with is establishing a business glossary with consistent definitions and linking those to your technical data dictionary. So this is a screenshot on the left-hand side where everything that you see here in blue is an actual executable link of a data definition or a data table. If you see on the left-hand side where it says encoding, that's actually a table directly in a database that can be accessed from this wiki-like page. For transparency, I mentioned that it was very important to share methods and methodologies and train on those. What you see here is an article that explains a method or a methodology for visualizing a heat map based on ratios across different states. And by having this explicit definition of how that visualization was achieved and the ability to use this as a training platform for other analysts significantly speeds up the productivity of those analysts, but also make sure that the method of how someone is coloring a heat map is transparent to the rest of the organization. And the third screenshot example I've pulled here is one about collaboration, and this is more how to incent that collaboration and curation in your general population. This is something that is fairly new to the Alation product, but that we've introduced so that stewards can track who are the leading contributors in an organization and be able to reach out to them with social credibility and thank them and incent them and gamify, adding comments and annotations and perspective to the data assets that are stored in the catalog. So this is an example of a leaderboard that some of the organizations we work with have decided to share directly with their user population in order to incent more collaboration through the data catalog and have those curators assist official data stewards in their stewardship efforts. So with that intro on best practices, and hopefully I've gotten everyone thinking a bit about some small changes they could make immediately in their organization, I'd like to hand the floor over to Aaron to walk through a demonstration of a day in the life of a stewardship organization and how a data catalog like Alation might be able to help.
Terrific, Stephanie. Excuse me. Thank you so much for that great intro. And I'll try to, as much as possible, weave in some of the great examples Stephanie used into this demo about consistency and collaboration. Let me push this, and hopefully now everybody can see my screen. So I thought I would just begin picking up right where you left off, Stephanie, with this example of doing an analysis and showing your work, showing your methodology. So this is, again, this analysis where we look at a data set that we'll talk about more in a minute, looking at the ratio of male to female doctors throughout the U.S. and how that might correlate with parent political preferences in a state. And what's nice is you can see these pretty pictures here and some pretty heat maps and kind of draw your own conclusions by viewing and reading. And you can have business users starting conversations about this content, and all of that be happening kind of on the surface level, just the way the discourse was happening with pundits in the media about the Greek debt crisis. But what's nice is we can merge right into that some information about exactly how the analysis was done. I can actually open up here and see what was the code that was written, what were the definitions that were used. So somebody who disputes this conclusion can argue with it, and we can avoid faulty conclusions. So that's just a quick tie-in, I think, about consistency and collaboration there. I think one thing that our customers tell us they need to establish trust is to build a comprehensive catalog with a lot of information about every single data asset and every single possible definition. And so I'm going to show one example right now. This is a table page cataloged in Alation. And there's a lot of content here. And what Alation tries to do is, sort of what the calculator did for you. Maybe you talked about, kind of school-age math and showing your work earlier. When you use a calculator, suddenly you can think about, okay, how do I turn this word problem into an equation, and how do I solve it instead of wasting all your time doing things that a computer could do for you? So Alation tries to use automation to make a lot of the building blocks for trust kind of available right there. So one thing that does automatically is it crawls and parses all of the query logs, and those are contributed to both by people writing SQL as well as folks using visualization tools and data prep tools. Alation reads in all of that and sees what the patterns are. So I'm going to go here to the Filters tab and observe that this table, which has some medical information, is very often queried by state. And we can actually see the particular values that state gets filtered to. And what you'll see right here is that there's a couple definitions of Northeast. And if I know a lot of folks are not in the US, but I think many people on the call are. If you look at this definition of Northeast, again, people have queried the state column 2,300 plus times. And each one of these sets of values is ranked in order of how often people use that value. And what we notice is, the third most often thing is this set of values that are just supposed to be the Northeast, But giving you guys a little bit of time, you'll notice actually Vermont is missing, right? So the good news is the majority of people, more often than people forget Vermont, they do include Vermont, but a lot of people are forgetting it. And so then data stewards can come in and notice that trend that's wrong, put in a note, and then drive people toward the right behavior. And this reminds me a lot, we see this all the time with our customers, of what Stephanie was saying earlier about how New Zealand being excluded from Reinhardt and Rogoff's GDP analysis led to potentially wrong austerity measures. You could imagine potentially, even though it's a small state, how excluding Vermont will lead to the wrong number. So having this sort of view into what the little pieces, the filters, the joins are that contribute to an analysis can be really critical in both ensuring that answers are trusted and to quickly taking those stylized facts and digging into why they might be wrong and fixing it and leading to better decisions for the whole company. So that's one example of where automation helps. This might be really hard to surface otherwise. Alation makes it easy. The next example will be a more typical stewardship use case we have from a lot of our customers, which is just trying to make sure not just that things are used correctly, but that they're being used in a way that's compliant with the law. So you might want to make sure that everyone is not using social security number inappropriately in their work. So here I'm typing in social security number in plain English, and Alation is finding for me all the different places where social security number appears in my database. And it's not that many here on our demo server, it's about 7 columns. In many of our customers, this might be scattered around in tens of thousands of columns across thousands of tables because companies grow through M&A and tables are duplicated and all sorts of things happen causing this data sprawl. So obviously Alation figures out that this column called literally social underscore security underscore number means social security number. That's pretty easy. And because of that, you can see here, this is Ali the robot. She's got 2 little eyes and an antenna. Hopefully that's showing up high res on your screens. So Ali guessed that you can take away the underscores and capitalize, and some say that's true. But Ali also did some things automatically that might be harder. Oftentimes data architects hate vowels. They want to type a little faster. And so hopefully y'all can still see me. Here you can see social security number with no vowels, but here's Ali the robot with a yellow head, and it says Alation automatically generated this title. Please either confirm that title or discard it. And then a human, we call this paradigm machines guess, people confirm. If a human confirms it, it'll reinforce Ali's sense of the language model and help her guessing this accurately in the future. If you reject it, that'll be negative feedback. It's some supervised learning that happens. Here's another example where instead of abbreviating, it goes soc sec num, just kind of cutting off the endings. And then here's an example where it's social security number is just reduced to SSN. These are all cases that Ali, the robot's able to figure out. And in each case, a human can confirm the particular. But even more important than finding all of these individually, it can then help to aggregate a rule and to say, look, there's many different ways, social security number with no vowels, spelled out, abbreviated, made into an acronym or initials, across different data sources, different schemas, different tables from different subsidiaries, et cetera. We can find all of them and then curate them together, again, for consistency, like Stephanie was talking about in the collaboration, and for trust. So first of all, we've already made Stephanie the data steward for Social Security because in between running webinars, she loves to ensure data quality to make the world a more trustworthy place.
I love data quality.
Love it. And we see that somebody's already gone and said this might be relevant to GDPR, even though that's more for Europe and this is more for the US. We can also go in here and say something like, it relates to security, or it relates to PII, like the other 56 objects, or privacy. I'll make a new tag for that, why not? Anyway, we can also go in here to this field and say that it is PII, and we can go in and add a little warning about how this should be used and say SSNs are super sensitive. Now what's neat is this is a little catalog page in a box, and it's going to apply to all of these instances. And again, here it's only 7. In real life, there could be hundreds. And so now if I go over back to my search results, and go to this example here, we'll see that that warning appears propagated to the social security number, as do those new tags with security and PII, as does that PII is yes. And so this is a way to do a lot of documentation very quickly, which is a good segue. So there's some things that Alation can do automatically to ensure trust. Sometimes you need a human in the loop, but Alation can help make it so that a couple of clicks like we just did can have a big effect. In this case, you know, I made a change in one place that affected 7 objects. In real life, it might affect thousands. Let me show you another example of how that can happen. But first, to set that up, I'm going to show a quick integration Alation has with Tableau, and then we'll show how to propagate in that integration. So I'm moving now from Alation's product to one many of you on the call may have seen. This is Tableau Server, and you know I've got a bunch of different projects and workbooks and everything else, and I've got this one data source here. And we can see this data source has this little badge, something that was released recently in Tableau. I'm now suddenly forgetting if it's 10.4 or 10.5, but this is sort of a ribbon. You can kind of see it. It looks like a first place prize that you probably all got in your data state fairs when you were coming up. So we'll hopefully have more of those in the future. And what it says is this is certified with integration between Tableau and between Alation and Tableau's APIs. So it's certified by Alation because it's been endorsed in Alation by Connor, who's one of our sales engineers. And if I click into the Alation side of this, we can see where that data source is cataloged in Alation. Alation keeps track of everything it connects to, of all the fields that are included in it, of its lineage, everything that goes into defining this data source. And on the basis of all of that, I can decide that I trust this source and add my own endorsement. So I actually just glossed over this previously when I put that warning on social security numbers. This is sort of Alation's flag screen. It's a stoplight metaphor. Red means stop, don't use this. Yellow means proceed with caution. And green means go right ahead, get to work using this for your analysis. So now that I've added that, we see Connor's still there, and I just added my endorsement 3 seconds ago. And now if I go back to the Tableau server version, we'll see that it's certified in Alation by Connor and also by me. And so that's a quick example of how we're integrated with Tableau. Now that's very superficial. What I was saying earlier was how you can make a simple change in Alation and have it have a really wide effect. And our Tableau integration is a fun example of that. Here's an Alation page, not for a Tableau data source, but instead for a Tableau dashboard itself. And we can see here it's again about some of this medical data we've been using throughout today's demo. And there's 4 different visualizations. Suppose I told you, this gets back to the sort of, who you're going to believe example Stephanie was giving. Suppose I told you that not all of these visualizations were trustworthy. Just like maybe not aerial photography is trustworthy. Usually that's a little more reliable a photo than a visualization. If I ask you which ones can you trust, can you not, there'd really be no way to tell just by looking at the graphic. So what Alation does is it actually draws automatically the complete lineage, where this dashboard contains these 4 views, which draw from these 2 Tableau data sources, which draw from these underlying tables in this case, MySQL. And if somebody in a totally different department, in a totally different building, who's more of a data expert, if he goes to one of those tables and observes, a major, says, you know what, it was good, but I've just observed a major data quality issue. So there was an ECL glitch is causing lots of these rows to be out of date. Again, some methodological challenge now for any downstream analysis. That problem is going to flow downstream like pollution in a river. So if I go back to that dashboard and look in the lineage, we can see now there's a warning that gets propagated, and this red line is that sort of polluted data quality flowing down from hospital info into this dashboard, so into this Tableau data source, into this particular sheet. And now going down from the top, I can see the little geographical plot, that one's fine, that the bar chart is fine, that this bar and whisker plot is fine, but I can see that, in fact, this pretty green heat map that looks so trustworthy, that's the place where the stylized fact has been introduced because of this upstream data quality issue. Now, I was, again, talking about propagation, how we can get all Social Security numbers at once. The cool thing about this is this lineage graph that's kind of nice and linear here. That's how it looks on our demo server. When we go to our customers, often we'll see that at each one of these hops, sometimes it'll be 5 layers deep, and often, instead of, this branching factor of 3 and this convergence here, often there'll be a branching factor of 5 or more at each stage. And so if you guys think about how, exponents work, this really multiplies out so that a single upstream table could actually affect thousands and thousands of downstream dashboards. And Alation makes it so that a single action can actually put a warning onto all of those dashboards, both in Alation and potentially in a partner tool like Tableau. And that would be something that would be very hard to do the impact analysis as that data steward, to hunt down all the different things that are affected could be really hard. You'd probably miss one, it would take you forever. Alation makes it instantaneous. And as the consumer, as you're consuming that fact, it would be very hard to do the investigation of, is everything upstream okay? But here you can just see right away what the issue is. So if you think about this nasty thing recently, again, international audience may not have heard about this as much, but there was some bad lettuce from one particular farm in the US, and like where in the food system does that get pushed out to? Alation kind of make that impact analysis happen really quickly.
Aaron, can I pause
Please,
for a minute
go
with
ahead.
a question? So the technology was a little slow in getting questions populated, so I want to make sure we can get it through some of these. Is lineage dynamic, or does it have to be updated manually? For example, if we use Informatica or SSIS to do ETL, how does Alation discover that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So all the lineage shown here between, in this case, MySQL and then Tableau is brought in automatically. And we are constantly growing out the number of sources where we can do lineage. But if your company uses an ETL tool or other tool that we don't currently extract lineage from automatically, we also have rich APIs our customers are using to populate and augment with them.
Excellent. And I think there was a somewhat similar questions that maybe we
Sure.
can cover here. It's more focused on the Hadoop environment. So for crawling or harvesting metadata from Hadoop, does Alation make use of Atlas or Clutter or Navigator? How does that work? So a little different than lineage, but also connectivity questions that maybe we can.
Absolutely. So again, we connect to many, many sources natively. Alation can automatically read in all the files and directories in Amazon S3 or in an HDFS file system, as well as automatically get lots of rich information about what might be in the Hive Metastore or set up with Presto. If you're already using Hortonworks, Atlas, or Clutter, or Navigator, we actually have partnerships with both companies, and there's some native support, as well as, again, those APIs for populating more rich content.
Excellent. So I didn't want to, the lineage one looked like while we were on that page.
Totally.
That. I won't,
And
I know you have a little bit more.
I just got one more thing I wanted to show, which is actually, again, just going a little bit more into the richness that you showed in screenshots, and then we can use the rest of the time for more questions for sure. And that's just jumping over to where we sort of left off, is with this idea of collaboration and making that collaboration as effective as possible. So again, ideally your computer automatically figures out everything you need for trust on its own, or if you have human effort that's required, a little bit of effort to go a long way. But sometimes you just got to bite the bullet and have humans write down some of their knowledge and their process manually, but Alation can make that process as efficient as possible. Because there are other data cataloging companies out there who will say, oh, you need people, process, and technology, and you just got to have 1,000 data stewards working round the clock. And the reality is the data is just growing too fast. We had a customer who had 8 million columns of data in their data warehouse back in 2014, and they've more than tripled that now. If you start today, even with the biggest team, you're just never going to catch up. So what we suggest here at Alation is, instead of setting the goal of documenting 95% of your data, set your goal being to get 95% of analysis being trustworthy because it uses only data that is documented. And that might seem like a very subtle distinction, but what this image in Alation Analytics shows, and Stephanie was previewing this earlier, is that it's actually much more achievable. You can document only 5% of your data and get 95% of the analysis to be on trustworthy data assets, because across all of our customers, we see the same pattern you see here. The usage of data, which again we figure out automatically from the logs, is totally logarithmic. Excuse me, I'm stuttering. So the most used table is often used 10 times more than the second most used, or used 10 times more than the third most used, and there's a really long tail, but that tail doesn't really matter. So here, each one of these bars is a table, and we're showing it two ways. One is how often people are looking objects up in the catalog, and one is how often they're using the objects in analysis outside of Alation that Alation discovers from log ingestion. And what you'll see is each one of these tables is green when it's been documented and red not. Now, if I were to keep scrolling to the right, I'd see thousands of tables that are totally red, but it doesn't matter. By documenting only the top several, I actually get over 95% coverage of analysis is actually being done. And the second and final example I'll show so we can have more time for questions is this curation dashboard, which Stephanie previewed before, where when you have to do all this work, and it again isn't that much work once Alation prioritizes it for you, it tells you which 5% is the 5% that matters. You can also make it a lot more fun by seeing what your peers are doing. And a number of our customers have used this to make what some of them call data duels, where there's sort of a competitive, collaborative gamification to get the work done. So through automation and propagation and delegation and prioritization, trust can be easy to achieve.
So just one question there. It looks like there was a little bit of confusion on what Alation automates when it comes to columns and column titles.
Sure.
And I know here on this leaderboard, you're showing part of the human process where humans can contribute to that. But how much automation is there to start with on column titles and making those business readable?
That's an excellent question. And you can actually see a little bit of that here. Now, this is our demo server, and we leave a lot of the things in guess mode so we can kind of show off how the guesses work. In a real customer, what you'll see is this big yellow swath actually starts to turn green over time as they're confirmed with that one click. This yellow bar here are all of the titles of objects that Ali guessed that haven't yet been confirmed. And as they get confirmed, they all turn green. And so we actually find that for a very large percentage of objects that exist, Ali can make a guess, and her guesses are actually fairly accurate to start, but obviously get much more accurate with that human supervision.
So the system goes through and automates a whole bunch of guesses of the titles, and usually those guesses are translating from the technical metadata title, whatever a data designer or developer really entered in.
Exactly, these examples.
And then Ali is guessing what the business relevant title is of that and asks for the guess will be made, but then human confirmation helps the system get more accurate over time, just like with any other machine learning process.
Exactly right. So here we get Social Security number with no vowels. Ali has guessed that SCL means social and NBR means number. If I push this green button, then Social Security number is one of these 44,000 things. It's in this yellow bucket because it's been guessed but not confirmed. The grays are the ones where Ali has no idea, but you see there's many more where she knows and where she doesn't. A few that are hand populated and a few that are confirmed. And again, in our real customers, you'll see because it's so much easier to confirm than to do it manually that over time this wedge gets bigger.
Great. And there was a general question though, who are the users of Alation as a data catalog? And I think what we focus on today is how data stewards can be a user of this tool, as well as individual users of the data can contribute as curators of data to help that stewardship process. But users in general, we also support chief data officers, data analysts, business analysts, data scientists, data engineers, IT teams that publish data sets out through Alation to make those data sets available to a larger user community. So there is a very broad set of users that Alation addresses. What you see mostly today is usage for stewards, as well as individuals who might have some knowledge to help curate the data sets.
Totally. And one thing I hope we also get to see today is, I love the way Dave Wells talks about this. We talk about this way internally as well, that Alation is sort of a marketplace for data knowledge. And what maybe you saw back in that, in this Tableau example is, as the person using Tableau server as a viewer, I'm more of a data shopper. I want to use this data to make a business decision. And Alation kind of provides this communication between the stewards who have the knowledge to me as a consumer, so I can be more informed and do something that I can trust, to your earlier point, and not make a mistake that could be costly.
Great. So Aaron, if you're complete with the demo, if you don't mind handing control over back to me. I know some folks may be wrapping up the time slot they have set aside for this, and I just want to share 2 more slides, and then we will go through. There's quite a few questions, so we'll probably stay a little later on the line to try to get through as many of those questions as possible. I wanted to just conclude with sharing with you some of the customers who are currently using Alation in production. So hopefully amongst the 50 different industries that are on the line, you might see a customer whose usage would be similar to your organization here. And of course, there are additional use case examples by industry as well as by profile of end user on our customers page on the Alation website if you'd like more information. And then I wanted to leave everyone, I know a number of folks probably have already read this market guide, but Gartner within the last couple of weeks has come out with a market guide for information stewardship applications, and Alation is included in that market guide. So if you are interested in evaluating a data catalog generally for your information stewardship initiatives and maybe more specifically Alation, there's some good information in this report where Gartner shares some recommendations. So I would encourage everyone to go to the short link to the right, alation.com/MGISA, and download a copy of that report so you have access to that information. So with that, our presentation materials are concluded, and we're going to try to power through as many of these questions as we can get to. We'll probably go 5 to 10 minutes over the top of the hour. So one observation I have about the questions, Aaron, is a lot of them are about Hadoop environments. So maybe we can bundle a couple of the Hadoop questions together here. The first question is, how does Alation catalog existing information in an on-premise data lake? Is that any different than a cloud-oriented data lake? And are there implications for scale, I think is the full intent of this question.
Got it. Yeah, so we have customers with both approaches, including hybrid approaches for sure. The main difference is actually just in the setup stage. So if you got like a cloud lake on S3, you specify buckets, the kind of top level nodes, it's a little bit differently in HDFS, but we do support both and have customers using, not only do you have customers using each, we have some customers who have both in their Alation catalogs covered.
Right.
And it can scale to hundreds of millions of files. We had to do a ton of work to be able to do this right, because often there are many, many more individual assets in a data lake than there would be in a relational database. And so we took that on because we knew it was really important to our customers.
And for folks on the line who don't know, eBay was one of the very first customers of Alation. They have one of the world's largest data lakes, as well as one of the world's largest implementations of Teradata. And so, and we are supporting over 1,000 weekly users of Alation in the eBay instance. So to give you a sense of scale, that's a good example of a production environment, which is on the high end of a lot of environments that we see.
Totally, it's a great point. We support scale both from concurrent users and a lot of data perspective. It's a great point.
So I think there's a somewhat related question about how we are architected. The question was, where is the Alation metadata stored? Is it on a relational database or in a Hadoop like HBase? And unlike some other offerings in the market, we do not take over a portion of your Hadoop environment or a portion of your database environment. Alation is installed as a standalone server that complements the existing operational environment you have to run your analytics on. And so I just wanted to clarify that architecturally. If you are interested in a deeper architectural dive, please reach out through the Learn More page on our website, and we're happy to walk you through that.
I'll just add one more thing, because I'm not always sure, why someone's asking the question, but if you're asking how it's stored because you want to kind of dig into that metadata more deeply, we do surface some of our metadata via a relational database, so you can kind of ask questions about your data at kind of that meta level.
This also might be a kind of an architectural question. It's when will you support Zookeeper in Hadoop distributions? And there's some additional context here about what Zookeeper is. I think the clarification here is there are some data catalog vendors who represent themselves as providing functionality for managing your Hadoop environment. That is not part of Alation's definition of a data catalog. So we would not use Alation to manage a Hadoop environment. We would use Alation to provide users of data with insight into what is stored in that environment. And hopefully that clarifies that question for whoever asked it without getting into technical details. But if it was a deeper question and I missed it, please reach out to us on the Learn More page, and we're happy to unpack that one a bit if there's more inquiry behind that. Oh my goodness, they just keep coming. Here's an easy one. Is Calmence on your roadmap to show lineage?
Yes. So actually, we recently debuted Cognos support, and our goal is to have a deep lineage across every BI and visualization tool. Where we don't support that, it's usually because of what metadata APIs are offered on the vendor side, and we're working through our partners to get parity across the board so everything can look as beautiful as Tableau.
Excellent. So this might be an easy one, but you may be able to show this. I don't know if you want to jump back into the demo. Does Alation have any features relating to gathering or displaying data quality metrics or profiles?
Oh, we do, and we're 3 minutes on the clock. I don't know if it's worth the infrastructure overhead, but we can do enough follow-up on data quality maybe. Absolutely. So we do some basic profiling in-app. I'll show you a histogram of all the values that occur in a given field and how often that happens. And we also show you something that many profiling tools don't show you, which is how those values are used together, as you saw with that example with and without Vermont. They're looking at usage. However, there are other tools that do richer profiling as well as richer data quality analysis. And we have ways of servicing that content on the Alation page, as well as some ways of using scheduled queries and whatnot to look at how data quality is measured. And I do have a whole other demo on that, but I don't think we have time to show it right now.
Great. So there are a whole bunch of questions on systems. I'm going to generalize here a little bit on systems that we connect to. We do have logos on our website that show you generally the systems that we connect to, but I think we can cover maybe some of these specific questions. Does Alation connect to Click? No, not currently. Click doesn't have APIs to make data available for things like lineage, so that's not a partnership that we have been able to make progress on yet. But I think Click is open to hearing that there's demand there, and we are as well. So if you're a Click customer and thinking about Alation, please let both organizations know. Looks like there was a clarification question on Hortonworks Atlas products. So Alation reads from Hortonworks Atlas, and yes, we can read from Hortonworks Atlas. We have a handful of customers who are doing that today. So just to clarify, that is a yes. We answered Cognos. I think.
Yes, we covered that one.
So there's some ECL connection questions. Does Alation crawl metadata from ETL like Informatica Power Center or IBM Data Stage or Talent ETL to get an automated lineage?
Yeah, so actually, short answer is no, none of those are automated today. However, a deeper integration with Talent, I think, could be something we'll see in the near term. But again, we do have customers who use all three absolutely and are able to use their APIs to get some of that propagation benefit, even if it requires a little more work on their end to set up.
All right, and a couple questions for more information. So one is that we're a systems integrator and working with several prospects on data catalogs. How do we get training? If you'd like to go deeper on any of the topics we've talked about today, or if you're a systems integrator or a potential partner, please do enter your information on the Learn More page, and we'll have the appropriate individual reach out to you, either from our sales team if you're looking for more of an architectural deep dive on Alation or a more detailed demo, or if you're a potential partner or systems integrator, put that into your request and we will get someone from our partners program to reach out to you. So this is probably a good one to address. I see that Alation is well formed to support the data steward role. but I think there's a need for a higher level role such as the governance board. Does Alation support other interfaces for data governors or chief data officers?
Absolutely, yeah. Chief data officers are both users and often the buyer sponsor of Alation for sure. In terms of governance roles, we definitely have data governance officers, working in Alation both to document policies, to supervise the progress of stewardship initiatives, and a variety of other use cases. So I think there are always more people who are in an acting data steward capacity just by sheer numbers, but often they're part of a broader governance program at a more abstract level as well.
Great. I think you just took away the question I was going to ask, but I was going to, oh, sorry.
Do you want to do the search?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm seeing one question about Alation search, and we're saying, oh, is that only over like metadata as opposed to content? And the answer is actually, yeah, thank you so much for asking. Alation does do full content search, and will search information that appears in any of the content of a conversation or an article or metadata, not just like the name or the title. If you're talking about searching data fields, we are not actually querying the database. We do provide a query tool, but rather the fields that are there as opposed to the actual content.
All right, I think we can fit in 2 more questions. One was, how do you support European customers? If you notice, there's on the logo slide that I had up, there's some very large European customers that are in production with Alation, like Tesco, Munich Reinsurance, BMW. So we have opened an office this year in London to support our European customers, and we do have very large production implementations. Allegro in Poland, so it's not just in Germany and the UK. We have customers throughout Europe. So we support customers directly, and we have some partnerships there as well. So happy to engage with European customers. And then I think I'm going to close on, there was a question about Alation as a metadata repository. Is the metadata repository based on everything in this catalog? And for those of you who are maybe new to Alation, I wanted to share that we have been selected as a leader by Gartner for metadata management. And so a metadata repository is one of the capabilities that we have with Alation. And that metadata repository does include all of the context of data that you see coming forward in the user interface in the demonstration. So that is a very rich use case for Alation, and one that we've been recognized by Gartner for successfully delivering on.
Absolutely, and we see what's a normal metadata management system would offer as being sort of a core on which we can add this extra layer of sort of curation, behavior I/O to make it easier to do accurate analysis, et cetera.
And I think with that, we've gone over time, so apologies if we did not get to your question, but thank you for making this an interactive session, and we're excited to continue the conversation. So please do reach out to us if you want to dive a little bit deeper, and we're looking forward to engaging with everyone that has interest on today's webinar. So we'll wrap, and thank everyone very much for your time today. Have a great day.
Thanks so much.